Esther, what a week.
Wes Streeting has resigned as the Health Secretary, meaning that the starting pistol has been fired for the Labour leadership election. It is like a bloodbath in Parliament. It is civil war in there now. The knives are out, the gloves are off, and they want him out.
Angela Rayner is firmly in the running.
HMRC, Angela Rayner story stinks. One rule for Labour ministers and one rule for the rest of the public. I think this is the biggest story about Angela Rayner that people haven't looked into.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Expresso. We're with our very own Westminster whisperer, the Tory MP, Esther McVey. Esther, what a week in politics.
Absolutely. All I will say is the starting pistol has been fired for the Labour leadership election. It is like a bloodbath in Parliament. There is absolutely visceral hatred for the man, for Keir Starmer amongst his backbench MPs. It is civil war in there now. The knives are out, the gloves are off, and they want him out. But looking into this visceral hatred, I mean, what Labour MPs are saying to one another in the corridors, in the tea rooms, to one another, the whispering, how do we get him out? He doesn't seem to listen. He didn't listen at the local elections. He doesn't listen to votes in the House. He doesn't even speak to people. The amount of people who say to me, I've never even spoken to Keir Starmer. He doesn't care. He's aloof. He's a snob. But it's what people are saying on the streets. It is unbelievable. They will say he is a traitor. They will say he is a liar. They will say he's a backstabber. He's not to be trusted. He's anti-British. He's anti the armed forces. We want to get shot. And you've heard what they chant. Wherever he walks, anywhere, you are in the news. You've got to turn your recordings off because they are chanting wherever you go. Keir Starmer is ... That's what they are saying.
And in the days leading up to the local elections, I went down to Suffolk to do a piece for the Daily Express, and I spoke to candidates and members of the public, and that hatred is palpable. They are very concerned about the lack of sense of safety, security, crime and immigration.
And you see, they know he doesn't listen. And if he doesn't want to hear something, Keir Starmer, he just puts you on the enemy list, that two-tier Keir, that sort of sense that if you don't say what he says, he's not going to pay any attention at all. People say to me he's robotic. They're even in question. Well, he doesn't even seem normal. He just doesn't listen to anybody. But I think we've got to look at those disastrous local election results. Now, that was the public. They couldn't have said it any clearer than those local election results. And that totally redrew politics as we knew it. So literally Labour roughly fell by 1,500 seats. Reform went up by 1,500 seats. The Conservative Party did badly, but nowhere near as disastrous as the Labour Party did. And I will say to you, this is a redrawing of the political map across the country. We haven't seen anything like this since the 1920s, when Labour surfaced and the Liberals went out. And so people are saying, gosh, what will this mean if those local elections came into a general election? It's something like Reform would take 110 seats from Labour. And I don't think Keir Starmer has quite got that. He thinks he will survive, but people close up to it know that they've lost.
Absolutely. And 5 cabinet ministers who stand to lose their seats potentially is Yvette Cooper, one of them, in Pontefract. Another one is Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary in Sunderland South.
Yes, and when you looked at that, they were ashen. They knew the local elections were going to be bad. But if we go to Yvette Cooper in Wakefield, I mean, there we saw Reform go up by 58, and we saw Labour collapse by 56, which was going to be Reform control. And for Sunderland for Bridget Phillipson, again, we saw Reform go up by 58. 48, Labour come down by 49. That's why they know it is curtains for Labour. I mean, it's going to be difficult for the two main parties, if I'm going to be honest. Everything's shifted so much. You see Reform out in front. We've now got a 5-party state. It's not the 2-party state. Greens didn't do as well as they thought they were going to do. Lib Dems actually did slightly better. And you're seeing where sort of Reform and Conservative are challenging, Lib Dems are coming through the middle. But like I said, it's what his MPs are saying about him, even veteran MPs.
Like Graham Stringer, who's been making some very, very harsh comments. Tell me what he's been saying.
Well, basically, he said, he isn't a man of the people. It's the worst ever Labour Party we've ever had. The man has betrayed the working class. He just isn't in touch. And he talks about the number of U-turns. And that's what people say. When you talk about chaos, I can tell you the Labour manifesto said we're not going to have chaos 38 times, and yet they've delivered that.
It's a party of change.
It's the adults in the room. It was going to be sensible leadership, and it is not. It has been chaos since Labour came in, and they will point to that winter fuel allowance, number one.
Which Labour MPs have told me repeatedly, it still comes up on the door.
Yeah, and then they'll talk about Chagos, then they'll talk about China, then they'll talk about farmers, then they'll talk about business people. There is not one section of the community that he's neither hurt or he hasn't harmed, but this leadership challenge now is going to see hell breaking loose, not just in Westminster and not just on the Labour Party, but it's going to be let loose on the public.
And let's talk through some of those contenders. Angela Rayner is firmly in the running.
Well, let's focus a little bit on Angela Rayner, because she thinks she's got good news today from HMRC, who said that she was cleared of deliberate wrongdoing and carelessness. But I think we want to look a little bit more into this, because I have to tell you, this HMRC Angela Rayner story stinks. And it looks like HMRC has got one rule for Labour ministers and one rule for the rest of the public. So if we go through this step by step, Angela Rayner sold her remaining interest in her family home to her son's trust. Yeah, that was her disabled son's trust, bought her remaining share, right? She paid stamp duty on it on the lowest amount, right? She should have paid the higher amount, which was 5% higher, and she didn't. Now, her conveyancer said, well, we don't think you have to pay the higher duty. And the trust lawyer said, we don't think you do. However, they did say, we are not tax specialists. And one of the lawyers said, you must get tax specialist advice, which she did not do. Then she got a tax KC, and who knows who's paying for that? I think it is the Labour Party. Can't really think why they'd be too pleased to do that. But anyway, he said, no, you should have paid the higher amount because you are deemed to still be owning it. So this is the truth. She had got £40,000 more to pay. You and I would have had a late payment penalty. We think she's paid a couple of grand more in interest, yeah? But lawyers are now saying, and I've spoken to accountants and spoken to various people, they do not understand how they've said there was not carelessness in what she did. Because let's be honest, she is, or was, the Secretary of State for Housing. Sits round the cabinet table every Tuesday morning, could have turned to her left and spoken to the Chancellor, could have spoken to anybody else, right? She could have found that information out. So they've said the legal test is this. Did she take the care of a prudent and reasonable person in her position? And they say, no, we cannot see how she gets away with that, because where she could have fallen back on her legal advice, she could have, but that legal advice told her to take some specialist advice. So I say this story stinks. I say it's a lot further to go. I say you and I would have been treated completely different. But you as a journalist, you'll be looking into this.
Well, and our inboxes are red hot when things like this break. And a lawyer did get in touch, and he said that HMRC is notoriously tough on others who find themselves in similar positions. And he didn't quite understand why HMRC didn't pursue Rayner further.
And I think this could well be pursued. I also will say here now, because I think this is the biggest story about Angela Rayner that people haven't looked into. And this is the setup of that trust. I mean, people have even talked about, how she inflated the cost. So I think, Angela, be very careful what you do coming in, saying that you want to challenge for the leadership, because I think there's lots that could go in. And this is what she said, and I've heard her say this. She said, I would sooner stick matches in my eyes than let Wes Streeting go uncontested. But I will say, her defence for me, that she didn't know, and what I don't get what HMR saying. Or HMR saying she's such a thicko that she couldn't understand what was going on. Because I looked on the website, you can find it quite easily, trust in my kid's name. It was very easy to find. So either her defence is I'm a thicko, therefore didn't know, so I wasn't careless and I didn't take advice. And if she is saying that I didn't understand it, well, I have to be honest with you, how can she be the Prime Minister of the country if she doesn't understand basic stuff like that? How could she be on a platform, a global platform, with either Trump, Putin, President Xi, if she can't even read what is there in front of her on HMRC website?
And speaking of another contender you mentioned there is Wes Streeting. Now, some lobby journalists, political reporters were saying last night they've never seen a briefing war like it between his critics and his camp, because they claim he does have the numbers, he doesn't have the numbers. It's been total chaos.
Yeah, I say the man actually won't win. I feel he's been weak. His supporters know he's weak. I think he had plenty of opportunities to seize the mantle. He didn't want to do it. The vanity again of the man. He didn't want to go forward. He didn't think now was the right time. Don't you remember that the strangest thing ever last November when Keir Starmer put on all the front pages, there's somebody challenging me. I've never heard the likes. What a buffoon. He did that. I think actually Wes could have gone then. There are several times he could. He has marched his people up to the hill and down again. I think the last time anybody marched anybody up the hill that many times was the Grand Old Duke of York, right? And that never ended too well. You know, the man now is starting to look like a ventriloquist doll. Other people are possibly pulling his strings. He also reminds me of Chucky. Do you remember that Chucky doll from the horror movie? So I actually think, yes, he's in the fight, but I don't actually believe he's got the fight in him to be the leader. I don't think it was embarrassing. He walked in, he had a 16-minute interview with Keir Starmer. I don't actually think he did. I think he was probably hiding behind the door for about 14 minutes. I mean, what have you got to say? You walk in, you say, you know, I'm starting the firing, you know, and it was meant to be, he said, oh, I'm doing it tomorrow. Who's ever heard of, I'm thinking about resigning, I'm going to do it tomorrow? It was a joke. And that's why a funny line from Kemi Badenoch yesterday at Prime Minister Questions when she said, you know, he walked into number 10 to say of his resignation, nearly as embarrassing as somebody leaving the information on the photocopier as she turned round to Robert Jenrick.
Kemi was on fire yesterday in the Commons, I thought.
And by the way, can I just tell you, it's meant to be a very positive state occasion when the king comes in and says, these are your policies.
Pomp and ceremony at its best.
But equally, remember, Starmer's only been in for like a year, 10 months. So this is all meant to be positive. So it is meant to be light-hearted. It's meant to be fun. You know, you've got, as you said, the pomp and ceremony. So you've got Black Rod, an elder sort of statesman from the House of Lords, knocks on the door 3 times to take the Commons down to the Lords to listen to the king delivering the speech. But remember, somebody, when he did knock 3 times, somebody says, not now, Andy, hilarious Scottish Labour MP, said that. And then the speech afterwards is all meant to be positive and light-hearted. So you heard the 2 from the Labour Party doing it, Naz Shah, Chris Shaw. But I think that Kemi Badenoch was right to make it serious, because it wasn't a time of frivolity. When I was listening to it at first and watching it, I thought, can you not see that the public think you're terrible? Can you not see the public want you out? Nearly 100 of your own MPs have asked you to go. 4 ministers have resigned, and you're sitting there as if it's fun and games. It is not. And that is what the public hate. So she was right to point out their failings, right to point out their U-turns, and right to say, you know, again, what you're doing, Wes Streeting, don't be looking at me, giving me a dirty look. You should be at work, and we all, you know what you've been doing.
And the country will rightly want the Health Secretary to be considering the NHS and the Prime Minister to be running the country and the Chancellor focused on the economy, but they're all infighting and distracted.
And I can tell you, because I'm in there, I'm speaking to them. I went to see a minister the other day. None of the civil servants are working. It was like the Marie Celeste. It was empty, the rooms. They're all chatting, chunnering amongst themselves. So even if some MPs are left working, loads aren't. I'm doing a case at the moment. You know, I've been working with you with this, with Jean Taylor. It had taken us, we took a petition to number 10 in January 2025. It's taken me to now to get a meeting with the minister. That meeting resigned Alex Davis-Jones the other day. So this about somebody who'd been savagely, brutally killed, wanting a change in the law about concealment and desecration of the body is not happening because they are not there. People need to understand when ministers are resigning, MPs are basically downing tools. Nothing is happening.
And I think that's absolutely true. I quickly, to go back to the contenders, want to talk about one other name that we haven't yet mentioned, and that's Andy Burnham. There's been so much talk about him.
The windbag of the North.
But the man is nowhere near the Commons. Now, I've been told that the NEC, the National Executive Committee, Labour's ruling body, if you will meet on Tuesday. But, I mean, is there any sight on this man setting foot in the Commons, Esther?
I think, I was thinking, why do they think this is their saviour? And this is what MPs are now thinking, Labour MPs. They're so despondent. They want to believe in this knight in shining armour, this fantasy figure. Oh, all would be all right if he was here. Picking on somebody that actually is not around and cannot do it. So it is absolute make-believe. They're projecting their sort of thoughts and desires onto him. But let's get a bit real about who Andy Burnham is. So yes, he went to Cambridge University. Straight from there, he became a SPAD. So he screams...
A special advisor.
Yeah, special advisor. He screams the establishment. From there, he was given a safe seat. From there, he became a health minister. And remember, that was the West Staff's absolute debacle. Do you remember that scandal in the West Staffs, right? So he presided over that. Then he lost to Ed Miliband for leader. Then he lost to Corbyn for leader. Then he's moved from being a Brownite, a Blairite, a Corbynite, a Starmer, you name it, he's been everything. This man is basically anything you want him to be. So he will be even worse than Starmer. He too is a fantasist. He's moved out of his suits and he's put on his crew neck jumpers and he's got a little bit more of, oh yeah, I'm a lad from Manchester, but it is fantasy. And there is no safe seat for him to get into.
So this is the thing. Afzal Khan, who is currently the MP for Manchester Rusholme, denied that he would stand for Birmingham after it emerged that he was potentially going to give up his seat. It's just been a total guessing game.
And Peter Dowd for Bootle. One of his big supporters, Andy Burnham, is Paula Barker from Wavertree in Liverpool. I guess she would like to give up her seat, but she said she isn't and she can't. And why? Because that would probably go to the Greens. They're not even going to hold that seat. St Helens fell pretty much unanimously at the local elections to Reform rather than Labour, safe Labour area. So there isn't even any safe seat there. So I think people need to wake up and smell the coffee. And then all Starmer needs to do is make sure it's only a 10-week, which it could be, a 10-week leadership campaign. And then he hasn't got a cat and chance. He hasn't got there. And I've heard ludicrous things like, oh, he's done a deal with Angela Rayner, because again, I'm hearing what people are saying, overhearing, listening to them, earwigging to them. But sometimes I'm like a confessional box and they want to tell me things. Oh, maybe Angela Rayner could be deputy leader again, and then she could get Andy Burnham a place in the Lords, and he could actually be the leader from the Lords. All of this really is for the birds. And then we've got some dark horses.
We do. Al Khans, maybe Darren Jones. Ed Miliband, I know he's a front runner, but the man is lurking there too.
Oh, he absolutely is. And he never got over getting a good kicking in the 2015 election. He was hoping he'd win that. He didn't, and he's bruised. And for that reason, people have said to me, oh, he won't stand again. But this is very different. He doesn't have to go to the country and have a leadership election. He goes straight in as the Prime Minister, so long as he wins the votes of the MPs and his members. So he's in a very different situation. However, people need to know he again would be a two-time loser. Andy Burnham is a three-time potential loser, but he would be a two-time, and he was rejected by the public. Nobody wants his net zero zealotry. Nobody wants mad Ed Miliband. I mean, that is what he's known as. Everybody remembers that sort of tombstone that he wrote what he was going to do on. Everybody remembers that bacon butty sandwich. He is not going to win, but he's also angling for any role, isn't he? He said to everybody, yeah, I'm made of strong stuff. I can go for it, So whether he's Chancellor, whether he stays in energy or whether he gets that. But those dark horses, and this is a bit of an insult to the country. I like Al Khan's, and I said ages ago, here we have a military man.
And a current defence minister.
Yes, he could come forward. But remember, he has got only 2 years in the House of Commons. He only came in 2024. What an insult that you think you could be a Prime Minister. People will run rings around him. And worse still, he is the one who allowed the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill to pass over into the next Parliament, and that is selling our veterans down the Swanee. But he decided to run away from Parliament on the Monday night it was being voted in, but he was back the next night for the humble address for Keir Starmer. So I don't think he will, though I think he's much more impressive than many other people. And then Darren Jones is the one who always has to go out and do the dirty work for Keir Starmer, but he could sort of slip through. It depends, how long things are going to go on for. But all we need to know, it is outright civil war in the Labour Party right now.
So earlier you called yourself a confessional box. Can I make a confession?
Oh, go on.
I'm concerned that the UK is a laughingstock on the global stage.
It absolutely is. If you watch CNN, which is like a left-leaning news station, even they are laughing at Keir Starmer. When they looked at his poll ratings, which are minus 18%, they said even Nixon, just before he resigned after the Watergate scandal, was at 24%. Nobody has got as low as that. And Bush, as he was leaving in 2009, after the Iraq War, even he wasn't as low as that. He was at 20%. They say, the guy is a loser on the world stage. And Trump keeps saying to him, as he did from day one, Starmer, you could have saved yourself if you weren't such a numpty. You just needed to get immigration like I being Trump have got to zero now on illegal immigration. You need to stop that. And you need to get your energy going. But I also looked, he's been clinging on for so long, Starmer now. It's hard to think really how long ago he's been clinging on. And actually, I think it was that Runcorn by-election that was the end, really, for him. So if you look at that, and that was the 1st of May 2025, and Sarah Pochen, Reform Sarah Pochen won from Labour, which would have been one of Labour's safest seats in the country. Yes, she only won by 6 votes, but she won, right?
6 votes.
And that was the end of him. And if you remember, he kept coming out saying, we've got to do things faster, more of it and faster. And everybody's saying, we don't want you to do more and faster. We want you to stop and reverse because you are tin-eared, tone deaf, which is, again, what he came out saying after the local elections. People want change. They want us to go faster and do more. No, they absolutely do not. So you had that, Labour dropping by 14 percentage points at that Runcorn by-election. Then the other one, and this is what Labour grandees have said to me, the 2-child benefit cap, when he did a U-turn, they were going to get, charge of benefits. So we're going to know what's going on. That they took the whip off 7 of their MPs. But when he did the U-turn, and that again was in May 2025, because he was destabilised with that victory by Reform there, and he started to make huge mistakes then. But they think that was when his backbenchers said, we can do what we want. He lost all his authority right then and there. And then that embarrassing, the end of June June, The Island of Strangers speech. I didn't know it was like Enoch Powell. Oh, I hadn't even read it before I went out there and spoke. All of this chipped away. And he has clung on now for a year, which is, I would say the man was pathologically vain with the ego the size of a planet, because anybody else would have gone. Theresa May took 5 months to go, right? Boris Johnson took 2 months to go. He's been clinging on for a year. And I'll tell you what the difference was.
I was going to say, this is also the man who promised to put country before party, but he's now putting man before both.
He is you are so right. It is all about Starmer survival. I will do anything to stay there, right? But Theresa May had to contend with Brexit, and she also didn't have a majority. Boris Johnson had to deal with a once ever in a lifetime pandemic, and then the Ukraine war and the surge in energy prices, yeah? Starmer has had to deal with nothing. All Starmer has dealt with is his inability to lead, his complete incompetence. And everybody keeps saying now he didn't have a plan when he came to leader. But that's the difference. He's not had to deal with everything. He is just useless.
And it's worth saying that another really dark cloud that's still hanging over his head is the Lord Mandelson saga, which will play out publicly next week when the last tranche of documents is released.
You know, this is like a circling firing squad, right? So he ain't going to do well when they're released next week, because everybody's going to know more about Starmer, right? But the man who's really driven the knife, hasn't it? The man who's really started that leadership contest there has been Wes Streeting. And Wes Streeting is probably going to be exposed through those further files coming out about Mandelson, about his close relationship. Questions were, who paid for Wes Streeting's wedding? Was that by Mandelson too? People are going to say, who did that reshuffle? Mandelson. Who benefited from that reshuffle? So in a way, Starmer is saying, if I don't win this with this Mandelson documents coming out, neither are you, Wes Streeting. But like I said, Starmer would chuck anybody under the bus, and we saw that this week.
With, unfortunately, the monarch, who also had to pay the price. So this is quite interesting. The palace apparently told Number 10 to keep the king out of Labour's chaos. Do you think they did that?
I think it was an embarrassment. I was there. I watched it. It was. I think the king looked deeply uncomfortable the complete time. He must have been thinking, what a farce this is, that I'm reading out this for somebody who won't be around, the odds are, to even deliver it. He was deeply uncomfortable. I will also say, which I was shocked at, how few peers were there in the House of Lords to watch it. Now, I thought it could have been a couple of things. One, because everybody thought it's a pantomime parliament and this is not going to happen from a pantomime prime minister, right? But equally, if you remember, we've just now got rid of the hereditary peers.
Yeah.
So they weren't there. But this is another thing that Labour don't think about when they're planning to get rid of the royal family. And remember, Starmer has never wanted the royal family. As a kid, he wanted to get rid of the monarch. But when you get rid of the pomp and ceremony, which is the hereditary peers, and all you've got left is a room stuffed with, Labour ex-ministers, people don't want to watch it. People aren't there. And it is chipping away at our history, at our heritage, at our pomp and ceremony. And he's chipping away at that. So it was shocking there were so few peers there. Some other people said it was other peers having a protest and not going in to show their support for the hereditary peers Starmer's just got rid of.
Speaking of protests, though, we have heard so much talk of a coup this week. But it just feels like Cabinet can't even get that right.
Oh, they're a Cabinet of cowards. They have not done anything. They walked in, even when they saw the local elections, as you said before, 5 Cabinet ministers were toast. And I can't tell you the pressure from that. Can you imagine, right? So you're there, you go out campaigning with you. So you're the MP here, you work with all your councillors and you work with all your volunteers. When all of your councillors are wiped out, 58 in some cases, Can you imagine those phone calls? Well, I can tell you what they are. That Prime Minister has to go. He has ruined us. The word is we have been wiped out. All your volunteers, you might have 10, you might have 20, you might have 100, will say, we have knocked on doors for years. We have put letters through leaflets through letterboxes for years. We had this huge victory less than 2 years ago, and you have destroyed us because of his choices and his competence and his lies about tax for working people, what he'd do for farmers.
I was texting some ministers and MPs on the day of the local elections trying to work on the following day's paper, and I could feel they were kind of saying, I'm too busy to send you a quote because I'm out there knocking and doing the best I can do for my candidates. So I can only imagine how those MPs must feel to have lost so many of their friends, their colleagues that they've worked so hard for.
Well, you don't think they're going to be helping them when they need them next year or the year after. They'll say, unless he's gone, Starmer has gone, who's inflicted this on us, tools are down. And many people in those areas, and remember, Reform really took those red wall seats, right? If you looked what was in the King's speech, which was, we're going back into the EU, we're going to have digital ID, we're going to reconfigure the police to take more off the streets, we're going to let more people out of prison. No, working class people, like any of that is a slap in the face. And that's why Reform did so well. What does the man not get? I mean, he's meant to be bright. What does he not get? He is an absolute political pygmy.
And on Wednesday next week, MPs will vote on the King's speech.
I tell you, that will be another disaster. I mean, it is
a vote of no
totally chaos. So what it means, you're quite right. So there's speeches and debates all week. And by the way, it's been very infantile, what he's called them, like, ooh, let us turn the economy around. Ooh, let us help you with police. I mean, really infantile, the titles. But we will vote on them. Now, historically, it's been a vote of no confidence, but it wouldn't necessarily in itself be that. But for you not to get your priorities through the House, it is an embarrassment. That could also trigger a vote of no confidence, and it would come secondary. They wouldn't do it in the government, they'd just do it in him. So they would stay as a government, because the last time it happened would be Baldwin in 1924, that, the vote didn't go, would have been the King's speech again then, and then it went to a minority Labour government. But I think it would just trigger another sort of vote. It would just trigger this chaos. But all I will say, the country is in for one hellish time.
Well, come back next week for the latest on what will no doubt be another explosive week in Westminster. Thank you so much, Esther, and thank you so much to you at home. Please do like, share, subscribe, and hit the hype button. We'll be back tomorrow.